Hi there, it's Wendy Hernandez with Command Courtroom. And today with us, we have Gwynn Raimondi. And let me tell you a little bit about Gwynn before I give her a chance to say hello. Gwynn deals in trauma, and it's more than just dealing with trauma. She goes so deep, and we're going to delve into that. But just to let you know a little bit about her background, she received her Bachelor of Science in Physics, that's pretty impressive, from Seattle University in 1998, and her Master of Arts in Clinical Psychology from Saybrook University in 2015. She interned and externed at the Healing Center, a family grief support center working with children, teens, and adults for over 3 years. Gwynn worked as a licensed marriage and family therapist associate in the state of Washington for over 5 years prior to deciding not to renew her licensure for a variety of professional and personal reasons. She utilizes all her training and experience to work with clients as a trauma support practitioner. And she has studied so much, you guys, like family, communal, and cultural systems, child and human emotional development, human lifespan development, attachment theory, feminist theory. The list goes on, and it's very impressive. Mother daughter relationships, body, mind, spirit connections, the grief process, and more. She finds family relationships and the human mind, body, spirit connection to be fascinating and enjoys exploring the who, what's, and whys of how we all tick. And another thing I will add is that Gwynn is an amazing writer. You have to check out her blog, gwynraimondi.com. We'll post a link, but she's fantastic. So thank you, Gwynn, for being with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Wendy.
Oh, you're welcome. So I like to talk with different experts about trauma because a lot of my viewers and a lot of the clients that I deal with have experienced trauma through abusive relationships, toxic relationships, and then they find themselves being affected by this trauma as they're navigating divorce or separation or co parenting or just parenting in general. So, trauma is your wheelhouse. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is my thing for
Okay.
sure.
Awesome. So, and when we talked before the live stream, we were talking about trauma and how people can begin to free themselves from the chains of trauma. Can you talk to us about how people often shut down when they are victims and what effect that can have on them, the shutting down?
The shutting down. So, first, if it's okay, I'd like to define trauma
Please.
and what I consider to be trauma, because often we consider trauma to be to give it a very narrow definition of it's physical abuse, it's sexual abuse, it's the big capital T trauma, and trauma comes in many shapes and sizes, and it comes from both our interpersonal relationships, that happens, absolutely, abuse and neglect are, our traumatic experiences, and also, things like car accidents are traumatic. Also, things like surgeries can be really traumatic to our bodies because our bodies don't fully understand what's happening. And so, even though cognitively we're giving consent, we want the surgery, like we know we need it, blah, 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 our body might have a trauma response to being cut open, having pieces of it taken out, or weird parts put in, right? And so our systems respond to that. And there's also the piece that is societal and cultural. When we look at white supremacy, when we look at capitalism, when we look at patriarchy and misogyny and rape culture, right? All of these things that we all have grown up in
Yeah.
because we've grown up in this, in this culture, in this society, and that both subtle and overt messaging that we receive from that. So, and of course, depending on where we are in the margins and where our intersections are, will also inform more how trauma impacts us. So while it is absolutely true, abusive relationships are traumatic, and I am not discounting that, there are also multiple layers that add to that and add to our ability to relate with each other.
Thank you for that expansion. I mean, because and based on that, and I'm sorry I cut you off. So if you still have that thought, hold it. Based on what you just described, would you say that at some point all of us have been, you know, experienced trauma?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because not
Yeah.
only do we have our own lived experience trauma, but we also have ancestral trauma that lives in our genetics, in our DNA. The study of epigenetics has found, the last I read, and it's been a couple of years, so they may have found more, but the last I read, they have found a trauma marker in our DNA that can go back 14 generations.
Wow.
So 14 generations of unresolved trauma can be living, and probably more. I mean, let's be honest, it's probably more than that. But what they found is 14 generations. And so that means, any of our ancestors who've experienced abuse, who have had other kinds of traumatic experiences that weren't resolved in some way, that all lives within our system too. So that adds to and exacerbates the cultural experience that we have, and then our interpersonal relationships. So I absolutely believe all of us have trauma. All of us live with trauma in our systems to more and less of a degree, depending, again, on our personal experiences, where we are in the margins, where those margins intersect. So, yes.
So that idea of ancestral trauma, that's fascinating to me. So what I hear you saying is that although like I, for example, may not have directly experienced a certain type of trauma, the fact that maybe a great 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 grandparent experienced it may be affecting me today. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying, Gwynn?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's hopeful about the trauma markers in our DNA is that they are mutable, which means we can turn them off. So that means that we can train our systems that we are safe in this moment, and we aren't experiencing the crisis event right now. And so that helps with answering your original question of managing trauma, and then how do we relate with other people knowing that they have trauma and we have trauma and our stuff comes up and it makes things worse, and right, and while also holding ourselves accountable and for our actions, having compassion for ourselves, knowing, okay, yeah, this shit's going to come up, and doing the same for the people that we're in various relationships with, right? So I firmly believe that when we have trauma responses, they're understandable, they make sense. We get to have compassion for ourselves around that, and at the end of the day, we are responsible for our actions, and we are responsible for how we treat other people. Right.
Agreed.
So
1,000%.
right.
Yes.
So it's that both and. So if a person is in an abusive relationship, you can step back and you can go about the abuser, you can go, oh, I understand why you are the way you are. And I get it. And you got some work to do, and all of that's true. And you don't get to hit people, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
you don't get to inflict that on others. So it's that, again, it's that both and of, yes, this is true, and this is true also.
Yes. Okay. So I want to go into the management of trauma, but not just yet, because I still want to unpack a little bit this ancestral trauma that you were talking about and how it might be affecting me today. And I'm certain it is, but
Right.
what about the awareness? Like, how can I be aware that something is affecting me, and I'm not even aware of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So how do we know what we don't know, kind of thing?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. How do we learn to know what we don't know? So I think that the first step is always acknowledging that you're having a response of some kind, or that you had a response. So I often talk to clients about this kind of bell curve of trauma response and our awareness of it. So there's the buildup, right? Then there's the event where we explode or we shut down or whatever happens. It's the
Mhm,
event. And
mhm.
then, excuse me, there's the after event. And at some point in this curve, you're aware of what's happening. And it might not be till way over here, way after the event, days later, and you look back and go, oh, holy crap.
Yeah.
That wasn't cool. And I was really activated. People use the word triggered. I use the word activated. I was really activated. And what was that about? And as you're able to begin to acknowledge, even if the event has passed, oh, this thing happened, then you can start unpacking, well, why did that happen? Like, why did that bother me? Did this person do a thing that was, that violated my boundaries, or that was mean or cruel? Or, and the answer might be yes, right?
Mhm.
And also, even if the answer is yes, and that piece needs to be addressed, but even if the answer is yes, it's also probably activating a lot of past stuff. And that may be your own personal experience, but it also may be ancestral things, like, and not all of us know all of the details of all of our ancestors' histories. In fact, I would guess most of us don't know all the
I don't.
details of all our ancestors' histories, right? And
Right.
so there can't be just left this question of, I don't really know why that bothered me. I just know it did. And the other thing about trauma and memory is that we can also have a traumatic experience and we don't remember it. It's gone.
Really.
Our conscious mind will not let us remember it, because the remembering would be that much more traumatic for us. And so
Oh.
our brains are really smart and they're really powerful, and our brain will do anything to keep us alive. It will do
Mm.
anything it has to keep us alive. And that includes just saying, nope, we're not going to remember that thing happened, even though it's sitting back here, right? And it's in our body, it's in our systems. The brain won't acknowledge it consciously.
So, and even if the brain is not acknowledging it consciously, and we're not remembering,
Right.
then would you say then, though, it is very possible that it's affecting us?
Yes, absolutely. Because our
Yeah.
systems, our body systems, our nervous system, muscle memory, cellular memory, that all remembers it, right? And that
Oh.
that doesn't get that the brain has not figured out the way to shut that down. And so people may live with like anxiety, right? Anxiety and depression are the big things. But I am of the opinion that the DSM, the Bible of the psychiatric world, is basically a big book of trauma symptoms. That's
Oh.
pretty much my personal and professional opinion, is that that book shows us all the ways that trauma shows up. And we've all learned, those of us who've been trained have learned various effective and non-effective ways of working with that, right? And so I believe that the root of any quote mental illness, I don't really like that phrase, is actually a trauma response of either our own experience or ancestral, something that was passed down, and more than likely a combination of them, right? So when we live with anxiety, for example, that is, many people take medication. I encourage folks to do that. I think that we need it. If we need it, we need it. So there's medication, and the medication will help, absolutely, if you get the right one for you. And there's still the somatic work that we need to train our systems that that event, whatever it was, is past and is in the past. And we are not currently living it today. And so that is getting back to the idea of management again. That is the work of learning self-regulation, learning how to calm our systems, having a practice of that, and what that may look like. There's at least dozens of somatic modalities out there. I have my own,
Can I ask you? I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I don't know what somatic means. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, so somatic means, I actually don't know the literal definition, but
Oh,
it is
I'm not looking for that. Yeah.
okay. It is of the body. So,
Okay.
so it's the idea of how trauma and our experiences live within our bodies. So it lives within our nervous system. It lives within our muscle memory. It lives within our cellular memory, and the idea of the mind-body connection. Because often when we look at psychology and the history of psychology, I mean, this has been changing over the last few decades, but if you look at the history of psychology, it was all about the brain, and it
Mhm.
was all, everything was in your head, right?
Yes.
Nothing was anywhere down here. It was all up in here. And what's been discovered really in the last, since maybe the 80s, definitely the 90s, 1990s, is that that's not actually true. where yes, there's trauma that lives in our brain, and we grow neural pathways, and depending on our experiences, and yes, and yes, and yes, and it also lives literally within our body. And so within that, our back brain, so our survival brain lives back here, the amygdala and brainstem. And this survival brain is really what's in control of our autonomic system. So our automatic systems like breathing, heart rate, blood flow,
Yes.
right? All of that, that we don't have to think about consciously to make it happen. And so when we have anxiety, for example, what's going on in our back brain is our back brain is sitting there saying, we're in danger.
Mm-hmm.
We're in danger. And so my breathing is going to be shallow, or I'm going to hold my breath. Lots of people hold their breath, right?
Yeah.
My heart rate's going to be weird. I'm going to have digestive issues. I may have sexual functioning issues, right? There's all these things that can come up. And so the somatic work, is convincing our bodies that in this moment, and only if it's a true statement, right? I mean, that's the other thing, is that if you're living in an abusive situation or a crisis situation, that is not the time to start doing your somatic work of convincing your body you're safe, because
Okay.
you're not,
Got
right?
it.
And so, and your body's smarter than you, so it's not going to buy it, and it's not going to do any good, right? So this work really needs to be happening after, or when you're not in that moment, right?
Okay. All right. And so you were talking about, at least, well, of dozens probably of modalities to help people
Mhm.
manage. Would you be willing to share just maybe a few of the
Yeah,
easiest or most effective?
yeah. So, well, I mean, what's most effective depends on the individual.
Mhm.
I don't think that there's a one cure all be all approach to helping folks learn to manage trauma. People use the word heal trauma and resolve, and the phrase resolve trauma, and I don't believe in those words when it comes to trauma. I think we learn how to manage it, and we learn
Okay.
how to manage it effectively, but I don't think we ever make it go away, because the events happened. We can't just magically wave a wand and go, oh, I was never raped, if we were raped, for example, right? Like,
Right.
no, the event happened.
Yeah.
So we can learn how to manage then what the after effect is, and help lessen the symptoms, and all that comes with it. So different modalities that are out there that I've pulled from for my work are somatic experiencing, which is super popular.
What
Um,
is that?
Somatic experiencing is the modality developed by Peter Levine, who is a big trauma name. He did a lot of research. Though I don't believe they ever worked together, he and Van der Kolk are really like the people we hold up at the top of somatic understanding and work. Levine's written many books. I recommend all of them. He knows his stuff, and he has really great explanations of trauma. There's another one called sensory motor approach, created by Pat Ogden. It's another somatic approach. There's an approach called Hakomi, and I cannot remember the guy's name who created it, but he's from around here, around the Seattle area. There's an approach called CIMS, CIMBS, Cognitive Integration of Multiple Brain Systems, also developed by someone up here in the Seattle area. Those are the ones I can remember off the top of my head. And then I have an approach that I call TIE, Trauma Informed Embodiment, that I pull from all of these. All of them, all of the somatic approaches, are basically body-centered mindfulness work.
Okay.
That's what it is. It is learning how to be present and feel the sensations of our bodies without going into an activated response, and learning how to be present, and how to tolerate being present. Many of us and I am included in this, are really good at multitasking and doing multiple things at once and
Yes.
talking about and doing it, da 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 da, and yay ADD and ADHD, right?
Yes.
Which, right, which is a trauma thing because
Really?
that is about our brains not feeling safe, and so they have to like know all the things that are going on and figuring all the things out now so that we can feel safe, right?
Interesting.
So what all of these approaches do is they ask us to slow down,
Yeah.
which is really hard and and sounds so simple, but it can be really incredibly challenging for our systems to do that.
Yes.
So
I can see that, and it's interesting you mentioned ADD and ADHD. Like, I'm starting to wonder, between us, if I might have one of those, because my whole life I'm rush, 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 do this, do that, do that. It's like we're walking out the door to do something, and I have to take laundry out of the dryer and fold it. My husband's like, "What are you doing?"
right,
So,
right, yeah, yeah.
so it's
And
interesting.
yeah, and part of that is cultural, right? Part of
Yeah.
that is how we're socialized as, for those of us who are socialized as females, how we're socialized as
Yeah.
females to take care of everything and take care of everybody. And we're taught that if we take care of everybody and take care of everything, we will be safe,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
The message that we
Right.
get, right?
Enter ancestral trauma
Yeah,
stage left,
yeah,
right?
for real. Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so slowing down. So what I was really trying to say, not make it all about me, but slowing down is difficult.
Yeah, it is. It can be. Sorry, my cat is.
That's okay. That's cute.
It can be incredibly anxiety provoking. Lots of people. Okay, you have to move. Thank you. Lots of people talk about, because there's lots of talk about meditation and
Mhm.
mindfulness, and like
Mhm.
meditation is the way to like be present. And I'm not knocking meditation for those who can do it. That's great. And for many people who have trauma, they can't do it. They
Yeah.
cannot just sit there for 20 minutes and or
Yeah.
whatever the thing is. It actually activates their systems even
Interesting.
more. Breath work is another thing that folks are really encouraged to do to slow down and help
Yeah.
yourself be present. That can also be incredibly activating for some.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
so it really does come down to what can your system tolerate? What is the entry point that we can do for your system? Because it's not going to be the same as even siblings or, best friends, or like, because all of our systems are unique and different, even though they're very similar also.
Oh, interesting. That cat's beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank
Gosh,
you.
beautiful, beautiful
She knows
eyes.
it too. She's fully aware.
So pretty. I love her little face. So, do you have a couple of examples of tools or practices that people do, not breath work and not meditation?
Right. Yeah. So there's lots of little tricks that folks can do. So one of them is called lip tap. So you take your index finger and you tap your lips.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that's all you do. This is it. This is the whole exercise. And you do it for as long as you want to do it, just a few seconds, a full minute, like whatever feels okay. What will happen, what will eventually happen with practice, may not happen the first time or the first 10 times, but is that your mouth will start to fill with saliva. And that's what we're
Mhm.
doing. We're activating the saliva glands,
Oh.
which is connected to our digestive system, right?
Mhm.
And so our autonomic nervous system is broken into two parts, the sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Mhm.
Sympathetic is our fight, flight, that's our trauma, crisis response. The parasympathetic is also known as the sex, rest, digest system.
Mhm.
And the two systems cannot be fully online at once.
Mm.
So what we want to do is, if we are in a safe enough situation, in the moment, to activate that parasympathetic. And our digestive system is part of the parasympathetic. And so doing this activates that system, and it tells our body, oh, it's okay for me to digest food, so I must be safe enough right now.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
Yeah. I didn't make it up, by the way.
Yeah.
All of the tools that I use, I've I've been taught and learned along the way. And many of them are in the card deck that I have that's available for folks to purchase. Just these
Oh,
little quickie exercises, like lip tap's one of them. There's 36. There's 36 exercises in total. So
oh my gosh. I want to get one of those card decks. Are they on your website?
I think a link to it is. I'm
Okay.
so awful about this.
That's okay.
Yeah, I can. If it's not there, I can either get you the link or.
Please. Like I want to post a link because I can tell you, and I do meditate um, in an effort to help myself.
Yeah.
Slowing down is difficult, and I would love for me and some of my viewers to learn different techniques besides meditation
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and
think.
that's one of them. Another like really easy one is heart hold. So you just take your left hand, put it over your heart, put right hand over the top, and just apply some pressure.
Mm,
And if you want to let out a breath, let out a breath. If you don't want to, don't do it. But just applying some pressure. And that's what we're doing is we're literally applying pressure to a major nerve. That's part of our ventral vagal nerve system that helps us slow
hmm
and
hmm
And both of these, lip tap and a heart hold, are things that really you can do pretty much anywhere because nobody's going to know what you're doing, right? There's
Exactly.
there's plenty of other exercises that are a little more like people might go if you're sitting on the bus doing them, kind of thing. Like what
Right.
are you doing there? But but lip tap and heart hold, nobody's knows. And one that all the teens that I've worked with absolutely love is you cross your arms and you tap your hands back and
Mm,
forth. So it's one side then the other. It's not both at once. It's one side then the other. And again, you just do this for as long as you want. And the teens loved it because they could sit at their desk at school and they could just do this if they were feeling anxious, kind of thing.
Okay, so just so I'm understand. So the purpose of some of these techniques is it to bring a person to the present moment and feel safe? Is that
Yeah, so it's to tell our system that in this moment I'm safe.
okay?
And
Um,
they have different, they affect different parts of our system. So like lip tap is digestive system, butterfly tap is a cross brain bilateral stimulation. So it makes left and right brain talk to each other, which allows our front and back brain to talk to each other more. What was the other one I said? Oh, heart hold is literally activating a major nerve that says, oh, it's okay, you can come online. We can be safe right now.
oh my gosh, I see in my life how I can use all three of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Often. So all right, so these are really great tools. You talked at the beginning of the interview about you were talking about ancestral trauma and mutating the DNA. And so I want to talk about, when somebody has experienced trauma, and I don't know if this still applies, like if I had a trauma experience last week,
Mm-hmm.
to try to manage it better, am I also trying to mutate DNA or what am I doing to help myself over the long term? So I'm having less trauma responses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So it's not so much that we're mutating the DNA as we're like kind of turning a switch on and off because
Mhm.
the marker will still be there. It's just whether or not it's activated or not,
Got
right?
it.
So we're not, I mean, we are changing our DNA, but we're also not actually changing our DNA. Any of those three or any of these kinds of exercises are if you're able to practice them relatively regularly, they will have a longer term impact. And how that will show up is you may not have as quick or as heightened responses to certain situations.
Mhm.
You may, like those kinds of things, the little things that tend to push us over the edge because all the other things have been building up, right? Won't bother us as much. The things won't build up as quickly. So, yes, the exercises are meant for both. I'm in a stressful moment. I need to like calm myself down so that I can think through it, whatever that is. And also meant to do when we're not in the stressful moment to just help our system just regulate as a general statement. Because I believe all of us live at one, at some level of an activated state, just
Mhm.
because of the world we live in, and the unsafeness of the world as a general statement. So being able to develop that sense of safeness within ourselves. Yes, I know world unsafe, and I've got it. I've got me. I can, not that I can control the rest of the world, but I can take care of me and mine. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so that's helpful. So another question. So these are new things. I'm hearing about these things for the first time, which is like that's great for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it's going to help my viewers. I am such a heady person,
Yeah.
always living in my head and also used to this idea of we fix our responses, we fix our issues by thinking through it, by choosing different thoughts, by
Mm-hmm.
positive self-talk, by whatever. Um, what role does the head part or the self-talk or the does that what role does that play in your work with people?
So it does play a role,
Yeah.
absolutely. The thing that I think is really important for folks to remember is that you can't do one without the other. So, like, the idea of positive affirmations, I think, is absolutely, yes, absolutely, we should be doing that. And also, they're not really going to work as effectively as they could if we're not also doing the somatic work at the same
Mm.
time. So, one of the things that I encourage my clients to do all the time is argue with yourself. You get that thought that comes in that says, you're the worst person ever. And we all have variation of that phrase that goes through our
Yes,
head, right? Right. So,
totally.
the thought comes in, you're the worst person ever. And you just take a breath, whether or not you believe it or not. And you say, no, I'm not. I'm not the worst person ever. And you just argue with yourself, and you don't have to agree. You don't have to actually believe what you're saying back to yourself, kind of thing. But in time, you will be able to, because that's part of growing the new neural pathways that say,
Mm.
I'm not the worst person in the world.
Mm.
I'm a decent human being, right? But the first step is not saying back, you're the worst person in the world. I'm a decent human being. No, 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 no. You're the worst person in the world. No, I'm not the worst person in the world. Like, it's literally arguing with ourselves. And then we can get to the place of being able to say, I'm a good person, or I don't care what it is you say,
Yeah.
but, but the more positive affirmation piece. But first we have to be able to argue back and say, no, that is not true. That is not true. I may not have acted well in this situation, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad person, right? Kind of thing.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. And so, and just so you keep referencing neural pathways, which I've done a little reading about. And there may be viewers who are not familiar with this concept of what they are and what rebuilding them means. And I know this is a deep topic that we could go into, but just could you provide just like a little overview so people understand?
When we're born, our brains are a relatively blank slate. I mean, I don't think they're totally blank, but because we did have experiences within the womb, right? But they're a relatively blank slate. And
Mhm.
so as we, grow up, grow these we grow things that are called neural pathways that inform us about ourselves and our world. So the
Mhm.
first 5 years of our lives, we are laying down pathways like it's nobody's business. That is the most intense time of our lives that we're laying that down. So if we lived in chaotic homes or experienced abuse in those first 5 years, or if even like things that were and sometimes still are considered to be normal, things like we were left in our cribs to cry it out, that is going to lay down a neural path that says I'm not safe and nobody's going to take care of me,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because we're defenseless baby being left, even though the adult knows you're perfectly safe, right? But the baby doesn't know that, and
Yeah.
that's about the baby. So those first 5 years, and then we're still growing neural pathways. They slow down a bit for a while, and then we hit adolescence, and again, brain explodes, and we're laying down tons more neural pathways and growing it, our autonomy that much more, and that's why teens, push back at boundaries, and that's why teens, go against everything their parents ever say, and right,
Mhm.
like because they're trying to grow their own autonomy. and
Mm.
build a sense of self. And that happens, it's pretty intense during those teen years. It continues on until about 25 or 30. So our brains are not fully developed until we're about 30 years old.
That's amazing.
And so at 30, we still have, there's this thing called neuroplasticity, which is the theory and practice of growing new neural pathways and allowing old ones to atrophy. So we can, after, it's not that once we're 30, okay, we're done, we can't do anything now. It just takes a little more effort, that's all. And so that is that work then, because we can still learn things, right? It just takes us a little more, and the older we get,
Yes.
the more it may take for us to learn things. So
Okay. So basically, if we're aware of, um, a habit, which may be and I don't know if I'm using the right terminology here, but, so we have a habit and, so I'm 30, I have a habit and I think, okay, so maybe I have this neural pathway that's not so great and I want to change it. Then are you saying that a person can modify that with?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It takes practice. It's practice over time, right?
Yeah.
It's intention. It's all the things. And that doesn't mean that like biting nails, like many people bite their nails. That's a thing lots of people do. That doesn't mean that we break the habit, right? We aren't biting our nails all the time, but that doesn't mean we are never, ever, ever going to bite our nails again. We might bite our nails again in a like intense situation where like we're just super extra stressed, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that then you are going to be biting your nails every day for the rest of you can stop again, right?
Yeah.
So it's that time, it's that practice over time, with the understanding that, and also I might lean back on this because my body knows that this will help me calm down. Whether or not it actually helps us calm down, who knows? So yes is the short answer, and it is likely we fall back on these
Okay.
quote bad habits every now and then, because
Okay.
they are considered to be survival tools by our brain.
Yes. Yes. Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to wind it down, but I have one question that was sparked by something you said about a child in the womb. Is it possible for a child who is in his or her mother's womb to experience trauma?
Yeah.
Period.
Yes is the short answer. And the longer answer is if the birth mother is experiencing any stress of her own, that she's producing stress hormones that then are fed to the fetus. And so that goes in, it gets through the placenta, the kid gets it. The mom falls, for example, and hits their stomach, that has an impact. If the birth mom has an experience of even intense grief, like a close friend dies or parent or something while baby is in utero, all of those hormones are being fed to the kid too. There's also, the experiences of the cord gets wrapped around the baby's neck. That happens all the time. Nobody has control of that, right? So it's this idea that I really hate how our culture blames everything wrong with us on our mothers, because it's misogynist and it's bullshit and it's not okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be giving the impression that, if you're a pregnant woman, you need to be like wrapped in bubble wrap and,
Right.
and not have any life experience, because life happens. Like it happens.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Right.
Yes.
And does it have impact on a baby that you're carrying? Yeah, it does. Can you learn to work with that? Yeah, you can. Like,
Yeah.
like the kid can grow new neural pathways too. And so it's not like, end of the world. And there are some things that you can't control if the cord's going to get wrapped around their neck.
Right.
You cannot control that.
Yep.
You
Absolutely.
cannot control if someone dies and you're grieving. You can't. These are things you can't control. And so Yes, it has impact. And yes, also, this is part of the human experience.
I was just, you took the words out of my head.
Yeah,
It's just part of it, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, this is part of what we're here to do, I think. We experience these things. And at least, well, from my perspective, my work is to grow and become and learn and grow wiser and stronger from the human experience.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Gwen. And Gwen, like I looked on your website, I didn't see a book, but do you have a book in you?
Not yet.
I think you do. I'll buy it.
The book has been sitting out here for years. My youngest is just turning 7 this year, and so
Oh.
I have promised myself that once it's a developmental milestone. Anyways, once he's 7, I will be able to start having more space to.
Mhm.
And it's already true because he turns 7 next month, and he's already like, yeah, mom, I don't want you or need you. Like, you go do your
Aw.
thing. So it's just fun. I mean, it is like, but
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
this is part of the process. So
Yeah. Well, I look, just your knowledge combined with your gift of writing. I mean, God, I would love to read a book that you write. So,
thank you, thank you.
anyways, you have my vote on a book. But secondly, how can people work with you, Gwen? How can they find you?
Okay, so I have my webpage, gwynraimondi.com. I'm also on social media. I'm on Instagram under two different accounts that are public. One is called Trauma Informed Embodiment. So
Mhm.
that's the one Instagram, and then my other is Gwynn Raimondi MA Rights.
Okay.
WRITES. And those are my two public accounts. And then I have Facebook page, personal account. I have a Facebook group called Trauma Informed Embodiment. Um,
Oh,
so those are places. I also work with an organization called Trauma and Co. They're based in the UK. They also have Instagram and Facebook presence.
okay.
And we offer training at Trauma and Co. We offer training for professionals in trauma informed and trauma awareness for their work. And by professionals, we mean everyone, not just like therapists, coaches, but anybody and everybody.
Lawyers.
Lawyers, attorneys, yeah, absolutely. We've had, who do we have? It doesn't matter. We have all kinds of people we have nurses right now that are in the group. We have activists. So yes, anybody and everybody. I work with folks individually, and I also run online groups at various points during the year that you can learn all about on my website that vary in length. Some of them are 3 weeks, some of them are 7 weeks, and some of them are 6 months.
I'm looking at your offerings right now. I mean, there's some really good ones on there. Embodied writing, relating relationships and complex trauma. Embodied writing pleasure. I love that.
Yeah.
It's,
Embodied Writing Pleasure is going to go live. It's going to become a live group. Right now it's a self-paced program, but it'll be a live group this summer in June. So
oh, that's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And can people like sign up to be on your list, or do you have a list?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I have a newsletter, so you can do that through the website, or it's gwynraimondi.com/newsletter.
And so people can know when you're coming out with stuff. So that's
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
All right. Awesome, Gwen. Well, it's been so informative for me, and you're going to be back on a live stream
Yeah.
soon, so I can't wait for that. And I really appreciate your time, Gwen. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And so for all you out there watching, keep your eyes peeled because Gwen will be on the live stream soon, live. And until then, remember to keep on trucking and get out there and command the courtroom. Give this a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe if you haven't already to the show. Thanks.